So today I wanted to discuss Fulgrim, and I think he's a pretty underrated and also overhated Primarch if that could be achieved. Outside of maybe Lurgar, I think Lurgar is a little bit overhated because I mean he won the setting. You can't hate him for that. But I wanted to discuss Fulgrim, and I think he's really interesting. So enjoy. And this is gonna be something similar to my Lion video. So if you guys haven't watched that, maybe consider putting that up next in the playlist. I'll probably put all these together in a playlist overall anyway. But I want to discuss Fulgrim because I don't know. I feel like he's pretty underrepresented, and like, yeah, I know we got the new Snake Fulgrim model, but like, there isn't very much. I feel like too many people discuss Angron and like the other Primarchs overall, and they kind of just skip over Fulgrim. At least for me, anyway. That's what I've started to notice, at least in the community, because I feel like once his new model has come out and people have seen his new less his post rockstar look, that people have kind of faded on their interest on him, and then with the whole thing with Josh Reynolds Fabius Battle trilogy kind of being dead on in the water because we know the clone Fulgrim plotline is probably not going to go anywhere now because of that. So a lot of people are kind of just not talking about Fulgrim anymore. I want to change that because I think that above all my brothers, he was probably the one that I felt the most needed to stay because Fulgrim has such an interesting and complex story, and he's such an interesting character that I feel like he deserves some more respect. So that's what I'm gonna try and do. I'm gonna try and give Fulgrim some of his, just some justice, some overall, and like I will obviously make the jokes of him being a grape snake, but what are you gonna do? So beginning first, I want to discuss Fulgrim's origins and the creation of the Primarchs as well. If you guys are familiar with this, you guys can feel free to skip ahead. If you guys want to hear me discuss even more about, my father who would rather make his own children than raise his own, regardless, we are going to discuss the Primarch's creation. Now, according to the most recent book, The Era of Ruin, the Primarchs were revealed to not actually be fragments of the Emperor, but every single one of them was actually meant to be almost like a perfect clone of the Emperor. Not a one for one, because above all the Primarchs, only Lorgar was one who looked the most like the Emperor. Because this is something that people have been confused about, and I think that the Era of Ruin kind of helped clarify that, because there's a whole theory that Major Kill specifically posted about the Primarchs being warp gods. The Era of Ruin has confirmed that that's not the case. They are actually perfect copies of the Emperor's soul, is basically what the Era of Ruin has led me to believe. I'll try to go over this at a later point because I want to do a video on how the Primarchs aren't warp gods because that theory is personally stupid. I honestly don't like that theory, and while I will give it like lip service just to discuss it like I am now, I personally dislike it. So we'll get to that, and like I said, we'll get to that in a later point. But in regards to Fulgrim, what you guys need to know is that he was created as the third Primarch. So if you guys know math, you guys know that I discussed Lion. He's the first Primarch. Fulgrim is the third. For those of you who don't know what happened to the second Primarch or why I'm skipping over the second, what you need to know the in-universe version is that the second Primarch died off screen to just basically they got the Worf effect, which is where a strong character or a supposedly strong character is defeated by a more powerful threat, or in the case of Second Primarch, died off screen because of the horrors of the Great Crusade. That's basically why the second and the 11th are dead, aside from just being like fan bait for people to create their own factions and their own homebrew lore. They their deaths in the universe was most, or I guess from a meta perspective rather, was to signify how deadly the Great Crusade was. Regardless, that's kind of a bit of a tangent, so we're gonna try and skip over that and not waste you guys' time. But when it comes to Fulgrim, he, like all of his brothers, would be scared to the warp because when the Emperor created each of the Primarchs, he created them with the help of Erda, which is the Primarch's mother. If you guys don't know who Erda is, she's kind of an okay character. She's not my favorite. And because of the Emperor's goal to conquer the galaxy, Erda kind of got she kind of hated the Emperor. She kind of like I don't see where she got the idea that hey, this guy who makes super soldiers is definitely going to have these super soldier children and not use them for war. It's kind of questioning your logic there, Erda, but whatever you say, lady. So she ended up actually enabling the Primarchs to be scattered to the warp. And the thing that's very interesting about Fulgrim, I guess Fulgrim and the Jagatai Khan, who is another one of my favorite Primarchs, when they were scattered to the warp, the planets that both of them were supposed to go to were switched. Now, it's unconfirmed why this happened or how this happened, but the prevailing theory is that Kegarak, who is a god of the Eldar, the space elves, that he did this as a joke, but given Kegrak's propensity for being known as the Fool, which for people who don't know tarot, the Fool is both one of the weakest and one of the most powerful cards because of the amount of potential it has. So the theory about Kegrak is that he is a schemer on par with Zeech. And as part of his schemes, this meant that the reason why Jagatai Khan and Fulgrim, their planets were swapped, not the planets themselves, but rather the pods that the Primarchs were traveling in, while those were en route to their planets, they were literally switched partway through, and this meant that Fulgrim would go to Jagatai Khan's intended planet, whereas Jagatai Khan would go to Fulgrim's intended planet. And this is actually going to have ramifications for how they develop. Because the planets that these Primarchs grow up on actually nurture specific qualities and characteristics of them that will end up growing to become these both character traits that are empowering for them as well as very degrading flaws that will affect them in the long run. So, in turn, we'll get to Jagatacon whenever we get to Jagatacon, because fifth Primarch, we gotta go to number four, and number five. First, we got to go to number four before we get to number five, obviously. So, this meant that when Fulgrim arrived on his planet, the planet named for Jagatacon, he would end up on a planet of Chemos. Now, what is Chemos? It is a factory world, is the best way to put it. Imagine. Okay, people always joke about like Earth running out of resources. Imagine if that happened. Imagine if we ran out of the ability to properly grow food, and the only way for us to actually like get food was to recycle waste. That's literally a position of like work on chemos is waste recycling. Not just like garbage, but like food waste. And that was recycled. And I can also imagine it's not too similar to like Snowpiercer if you guys have watched that movie, the Willy Wonka sequel. But it's basically that they like any matter that's organic that you can eat, like anything that you can find that you can eat, break it down into organic matter, make it into like, I don't know, protein bar and eat it. So, that's kind of the life that people live on chemos. Even water needs to be recycled because there's a very limited quantity of it. There's no space for agriculture. There's no space for, well, there's no space for really anything because everyone is dead. Everyone is just focused on working. And because of how industrialized and polluted the planet is and how basically overtaxed it is because of how industrious it is, it literally has no time for anything else. People have nothing there is nothing to the people of Chemos' life other than work. Like you get up, you immediately go into the mines effectively and start working. You are longing for the mines. And this because of how bad this was, like because of how scarce resources was, there was a strict policing of population. Like you could not give birth because even a single person being born could throw off the entire scale of like food and food distribution effectively, and you could cause a starvation of countless people or even a potential extinction of all human life on the planet. Imagine the stress of that. That like even one person being born more than they're supposed to could potentially be a cataclysmic event for your society. That is ridiculous and that is traumatic for people living there. And and that's the life they had. The only thing they really had outside of work was aspirations of freedom, of aspirations of grandeur, but that they would never achieve. Like they had legends of these ancient gods, of water gods, of spirits, of these things that could bring. They had this almost like unspoken nobility to them. It's almost like this working class nobility that these people had. Like, yeah, there's a nobility in working yourself to death in an effect. Like, yeah, it's not great, but there's a noble act in that. And that's what these people had. They had the nobility and they had the aspirations to become great, even if they knew that the struggles of their life would never achieve that. And you can imagine how much things got thrown into chaos when Fulgrim arrived. Because this is effectively a Superman story. Because what I find interesting about all the Primarchs is their stories are basically the stories of Superman. What happens when a child, an alien, lands on this planet and is raised in that culture? Because you have the stories of what if Superman was raised a Nazi? What if he was raised in communist Russia? Right? Those are what if stories of Superman. That's effectively what each of the Primarchs' origins are. Fulgrim's is what happens if Superman grew up on a planet that was 24/7 work till you die kind of thing. And because of Fulgrim's arrival, there was a lot of people that consider that he needed to die. That because not even because okay, this is what happens. Fulgrim crashed into the planet, and these people that discover him, a man and a woman, are like, "Wow!" They're taken aback. He's beautiful. He's a beautiful child. Like on this planet, every baby is born small and malnourished. Fulgrim, as a baby, obviously was not. He's a Primarch. He is literally built different, and so by comparison, this child was beautiful. And the the possibility that the council leaders, the people who were in charge of the planet, effectively the politicians, the leaders of the planet, who I should mention, like even though they were like the higher ups, these guys were like the people in charge of society. They were still working themselves to death. Like that's how bad the society was. That even the top 0.1% still had to work in the mines to survive. And because of that, their rule was very strict. This baby was an outsider; it probably had to die. Now, luckily, the man in the situation who found Fulgrim, who would actually give him his name, Fulgrim, it's based off of a legend on the planet of Chemos of a water spirit. That's where Fulgrim's name comes from. I believe it's the Phoenician is where his name comes from. Fulgrim is something else. But regardless, the man takes the child, is willing to split his rations, which I should mention are already like thin, like razor wire thin. Because again, you can't waste food. You can't give people more than they need to survive. Because again, I think the average human needs like 2,000 calories. This is basically they're counting your calories and they are rationing the food daily so you only get 2,000 calories. Like maybe less even. And I'm imagining it is probably less because again, babies are born malnourished. This is a not great place to live. It's awful. So the fact that this man is willing to sacrifice that for his child is amazing. But from the moment Fulgrim could walk, which probably was like a couple days, because Primarchs tend to age like anywhere from 3 to 4 times faster than regular humans. So and they develop even faster than that already. So the rate at which Fulgrim was learning, the rate he was physically developing, it was so much greater for him that he was able to reach adulthood much faster. But obviously, it also means that he gets thrown into the workforce almost like immediately, like within a year of him reaching, well, I guess it's not a year, probably like 1 or 2 years. But I mean, time works different. Time is weird in 40K because I'll get to a later point, but yeah, time is weird. We'll get to that. So by the time Fulgrim is able to work, he is working. He has to work. It's what he needs to do. And he also develops a sense of like innate nobility in the workforce because it's like, yeah, I'm probably gonna do this the rest of my life, my infinitely long life, or like my for the next 10,000 years. But I'm okay with that because I get to do that, and I can provide resources. And I should also mention another thing that was really awful about living on this planet is that because of how scarce resources is and how scarce resources were and how intensely they had to recycle resources, it wasn't uncommon, and just because of, things degrading every time something is recycled, that they would actually be able to make contact with basically traders and mercenaries. Like imagine like rogue traders. So in 40K, a rogue trader is basically generation ships. So it's a spaceship with like generations of people living on it, and they travel from star systems, just basically trading resources. That's effectively what these early pioneers were. And what these people do is they would go to planets like Chemos, exchange resources, and provide them with additional ones like food, water, materials for building and everything like that. Like if your planet couldn't provide, you had these like rogue these basically the not the prototype for the rogue traders before they were institutionalized by the Imperium. That's what these primitive rogue traders would do is they would go to Chemos and trade resources. But the problem is that because they are merchants, they had a tendency to be very greedy with their resources. Like they would demand it was basically racketeering, and it was almost like a mobster state where it's like, hey, your people need food, you guys are hungry, give us give us double what we're used to, and we'll give you guys we'll give you guys what you need, because like you can't say no, can you? You don't want to starve. And so Fulgrim kind of despised this because it was like, if we need anything, we have to provide it, but I can do that. And for Fulgrim, it wasn't just like the very act of being in the mines, of being in the factories. For Fulgrim, it was the fact of like He was constantly being he was it was almost like the pressure of inadequacy was always on him. That is the best way to describe Fulgrim, because everyone likes to point to Fulgrim's greatest flaw as being his perfectionism. No, Fulgrim's perfectionism wasn't his biggest flaw. Fulgrim's biggest flaw was his own self-doubt and his fear of inadequacy. Because constantly throughout Fulgrim's story and his life, he's constantly beaten back, beaten down, and pushed down by the fact that he is probably not enough. That he doesn't get the same privileges as other people. Like if you compare Fulgrim's upbringing to Gilliman's, you can already see the disparity between these two Primarchs. These people that are meant to be equals on totally opposite sides of privilege of the spectrum. Like as Angron says, Gilliman was named Great One. He was trained in the Macragian High Riders. He was given the best of the best. And then you had people like Conrad Kurz who had to eat rats to survive and hide in the dark, and Fulgrim who would work himself probably to exhaustion, which was something thought impossible by the Primarchs. So that is the type of life that Fulgrim had in these early years, and this drove him to want to correct that, and this is what led him to becoming quite the industrious Primarch. Because while many people like to point to Fulgrim as the pretty one, or the sexy one, or the hedonist one, Fulgrim is actually very very. He's a prodigy, honestly. Like, yes, he's a Primarch. Of course, he's a prodigy, but like I don't think it's really specified how much Fulgrim has a diverse skill set, because yes, he's brilliant because he's a Primarch, but you almost don't expect Fulgrim not only to be like the working class Primarch, but for Fulgrim to be the one to study the machines they were using, to almost reverse engineer them to make new ones and make better ones. He was building the things that were being used on the factory line. He was developing automation. Like the planet of Chemos was almost like a 1900s London town where there was smog, there was industry, there was probably no health code violations. OSHA didn't even fucking exist anymore. Like that was the type of society that this was, and through Fulgrim, he brought them beyond that, beyond the industrial area into the atomic age, because they developed spaceships. They rediscovered space travel with Fulgrim's help, and with the levels of automation he was able to achieve, as well as just the sheer like productivity he was able to bring to his planet. I'm sorry, I can't fucking talk. And because of that, he actually rose to the ranks, not just like, oh, you're a great worker, like awesome. No, he rose to the ranks and became the chancellor of the planet, the leader. And because of how automated the planet had become, they didn't have to work as hard. Like the 18-hour shifts went down to 12 hours, and then 10 hours, and maybe 8 hours. You guys might even get a coffee break. So that was what Fulgrim brought about his plan. And like, yeah, it was still mandatory workforce, but people still worked, and you didn't have to work as much. And with the excess resources, Fulgrim traded with these space pioneers effectively for resources, but not just like food, water, building materials, because they had access to art, to materials that they could use. To Fulgrim, society wasn't just about how much they could produce in terms of productivity, but about what they could create internally, what they could express. And so Fulgrim, as he reduced the labor time, like the time it takes for people to manufacture, and the amount of time they spent in the mines, Fulgrim started to want to inspire them to use the newfound time to improve themselves, to create works of art, to just simply just become better people. Like Fulgrim was very much he was very much the go-getter guy. Like, hey, if you got an hour to work out, go work out. You got this. Like, you don't think Fulgrim like that, but he was the type of guy who would want you to do better, to strive to be better, because to Fulgrim, he grew up on a world with a shitty hand. He was given probably one of the worst hands among the Primarchs, outside of probably Angron, Kurz, and maybe Mortarion, but Mortarion's a little fucking salty bitch, so I don't care what he went through, regardless. So because of that, Fulgrim has that sense of inadequacy, that he can never be enough. And in a sense, he kind of almost pushes that on people unintentionally, like, hey, You can do better. Anyone can do better. Let's all be better together. And in a positive sense, that brings everyone up. It lets their planet of Chemos go from this industrial hellhole to not so much a prosperous society. Like they weren't like Tiska, like Magnus's homeworld, where they were, prospering beyond belief and they were, culturally diverse and all these things. But they did have time for art. They had time to make leisure. And Fulgrim had that. He had that chance to be that, and for the first time he thought he had achieved something. And then he realized he was just a big fish in a very huge ocean. Because when the Emperor arrived, Fulgrim wept. Like he genuinely wept because it wasn't just like we're not alone. Like, yeah, we know there's pioneers in space, but we are not alone. And not only that, but these people have come to help us, to help my people. Like the Fulgrim, the Emperor arriving wasn't just, oh, my father is here. No, it's humanity is here. Humanity is here together. We can rise together because Fulgrim again wanted everyone to do better. And how can people not be better if they aren't together? And so when the Emperor arrived, Fulgrim wept, not because of just the possibility of what they could achieve, because of the beauty and magnificence of how his father presented himself. Like if this is what is coming to me, I need to bring this out there. This needs to be achieved by everyone. If my father can achieve this, if I've been able to achieve this, everyone should be able to achieve this. And those hopes were immediately crushed because Fulgrim's Legion, the Emperor's Children, are, like I said, like Fulgrim, probably overhated because when they started, they were probably one of the best legions. When the legions are first formed, they're typically recruited from Terra initially. Like the first batch is always from Terra, and then they go up beyond the system, or I guess throughout the system. In the case of the Emperor's Children, they were actually recruited from, I believe it was Jupiter's moons. I think it was the Jovian moons. And these moons were home to a number of like really advanced like kingdoms, basically technocratic kingdoms, and the Emperor conquered them. And as subjugation, they had to offer their firstborn noble sons to the emperor to join his Astartes program. Those became the emperor's children. And these people, they had a sense of nobility as well. They were great warriors. And on one occasion, the emperor's children actually got severely damaged protecting the emperor. Like that's why basically they saved the emperor when he was going to be severely injured. They became almost like his bodyguards in a sense, outside the custodies for a time anyway, until they were severely injured and not wiped out, but they suffered severe losses. And as an honor to them, they were allowed to wear the Palatine Aquila. What that is, it's basically like a wing. It's it's basically like because the Aquila is, it's two-headed. It's a thunderbird. It's a two-headed thunderbird. Basically, what the Aquilon Aquila is, I think it's called, is just one half of the eagles on your pauldron. That's what it is. And even though it's only half of the Aquila, it's still a great honor, right? So they wore that, they donned it, and they became, great warriors. Well, up until the Blight happens. Basically, the Gene Blight was this, it's implied to be chaos. Like it's implied that chaos did it. That chaos sabotaged the Emperor's children because like Kegrak switched them. Like Kegrak switched Jagatai and Fulgrim. And then you have chaos, probably Nurgle, creating a genophage blight that specifically targets the Emperor's children to severely cripple them. It raises the questions of like why are there two gods being involved in Fulgrim's story particularly. Like, yes, they're involved in Jagatai Constar as well, but it raises the question of why are they involved in Fulgrim's life? And again, that's another thing about Fulgrim that none of the other Primarchs deal with. Like, yes, all the Chaos Gods had their eyes on particular Primarchs, obviously. Again, Nurgle obviously was eyeing down Mortarion from the very beginning. But none of the Primarchs were actively sabotaged by the Chaos Gods outside of just being scattered. And yeah, they all went through things on their planet, but the gods weren't directly involved outside of getting them in those locations, right? Kegrak deliberately switched them, and then Nurgle deliberately infected his legion to the point that only 300 survived. Now that you're like, okay, 300 stars, that's like 3 companies. Yeah, but legions begin at 10,000. All right, they went from 10,000 to 300. That is ridiculous. That is an insane drop in just that's an insane amount of death. Like absolutely insane. And because of that, when Fulgrim arrived, he didn't have that. He didn't start out with a full legion like his brothers did. And like you had people like Horus, whose legion was already massive because they were the first ones. Same with the Dark Angels. Like, yeah, they didn't have their Primarch, but they got out there first. They were expanding first, right? And then you had I believe it was the second or the 11th, one of the other Primarchs, and also like the Space Wolves. Like every single one of them was either 10,000 or higher. Fulgrim started out at the very bottom with 300. And not only that, but because of how few of them there were left, they literally couldn't even be soldiers. They were sergeants, which, like, yes, you are a soldier, but they couldn't even form proper units. Like, you would have one Astartes of the Emperor's Children leading a not a regiment, but like a squadron, so like 10 to 20 regular soldiers. And that's awful. Like, you're basically just support staff at that point. Although I should mention that this did mean that a lot of them got a sense of like superiority because they're like, oh, I'm leading humans, I'm better than them. But I should also add that these 300 Emperor's Children were still like the good ones. I'm kind of trying to avoid saying because it sounds a little awful, but it's kind of true. These Emperor's Children viewed their duty of leadership as like an example, like, hey, I'm setting an example for humanity. I am a leader. I am a sergeant. I will lead these soldiers into battle, kind of thing. When Fulgrim arrived, however, he was able to immediately speed up the production of Gene Seed, and he allowed Chemos, which was a planet that had begun to not flourish and not even fully recover, but it was doing better, obviously. And he had them provide them like their sons to the Legion in order to create more starters as well to expand the numbers of the Emperor's children. That was their goal, hopefully to get as many, you know, I'm starting off at 300. Horse is over there with like 20,000 at this point. I don't even know where the Dark Angels are, what they're doing. I'm pushing recruitment. But not only that, not only did Fulgrim push to like massively balloon his numbers, but because of Fulgrim's propensity to want people to excel to the best of their abilities and to do what they can to the best of their abilities, Fulgrim drilled his legion excessively. Like he wanted every single one of the 300 that he had and all the futurist stars within his legion to be so basically multifaceted and so skilled in so many different and diverse methods of warfare and equipment that if anyone was lost, they could immediately be replaced with someone who was just as qualified, just as skilled, and could do their job just as well. This was basically like, hey, like this is almost like the Ultramarines, where like the Ultramarines wanted to be so good in everything, right? But it was like, okay, every Ultramarine is meant to work together to a particular, like, hey, if we need to be Devastators, we can all work in the Devastator path, and we can all work together to achieve the Devastator tactic. But for the Emperor's Children, it wasn't the whole Legion changing because it wasn't like, oh, we can adapt to whatever we're facing. No, it was no, we're still going to be a Legion, but if any unit from like let's say a tactical marine, no, not tactical marine, let's say an assault marine dies, we can get just Joe Schmo tactical marine here and throw him into the assault squad, and he's gonna be just as good as if he was in a tactical squad. That's basically what it is. So this also meant that the more skills and the more diverse, methods of warfare you were trained in. So like let's say you were a tactical marine. You learned Assault Squadron, Devastator Squadron, Biker Squadron, and you were also considered a veteran and a Terminator at the same time. You were high. You were considered, high above high among the Legion. Whereas if you only knew like two of them or three of them, you were seen. It created this like sense of superiority as well. It further fostered within the Legion. And so, you had people who are like, "Oh, I'm skilled in everything. I'm as good in everything as I can be." It was almost like very Eldar in a way. And that was what Fulgrim wanted. He wanted his Astartes to be as good as they could. He wanted them to be the best they possibly could. To the point that on one occasion, Fulgrim took over a planet with like by himself, not by himself, but him and five Terminators, which is like, okay, like I know the math, but like I feel like five Astartes is a little underselling which need to take a planet, but okay, pop off, Queen, I guess. But I should mention that before his legion became its full powered legion status, Fulgrim further pushed down by the fear of inadequacy of reminders that he's not enough, that he's starting off below everyone. Like he's literally like they literally it's literally I'm kicking you in both your knees and then I'm kicking you in the balls and I'm telling you to run I'm telling you to run a 100-meter race while that guy already got a head start. That's what Fulgrim constantly had to deal with in the sense that that's what he had to deal with. And I'm like, I know I'm kind of going over it multiple times, but like, I want to emphasize that this is part of his story. This is what Fulgrim deals with, and everyone kind of just jumps on the fact that Fulgrim, he's corrupt, he's evil, he's perfectionist, whatever. But like, when you look at the things he's gone through and look at the theme itself and the personality that Fulgrim has, a lot of his decisions make a lot more sense and can almost be considered like justifiable in a sense up to chaos corruption because at that point you can't justify it because it's not Fulgrim and therefore he didn't do anything wrong. You know what? Whatever you say. But I'm getting ahead of myself, obviously. Because he started off at such a small legion, Fulgrim had to work alongside Horus. And while this would foster a very good, brotherhood between them, like Fulgrim, like I'd say that Fulgrim and Horus were very close, but they weren't as close as Horus and Sanguinius, obviously. But when you consider the fact that, like, okay, I'm not as close to you as you are with your best friend and favorite brother, but we're still close. And I believe it took like 40 years. I think it was 40 years of Horus and Fulgrim working together because it took that long for his legion to reach the full strength legion status. But at the same time, because Fulgrim was, fought alongside Horus, his legion, because Horus's legion was specifically the attack legion, like, every single one of us pushes on the aggressive. This also promoted Fulgrim's ability to diversify his units. Like, okay, Big Bro's got the offense. Let's do everything else. Let's do everything else. And this is honestly kind of funny because like when you think about it, like Horus led most of the legions by accident, not by accident, but like indirectly, because he led the Star Hunters and the White Scars. He led the Third Legion alongside Fulgrim. He takes control of the Raven Guard and their infancy, and then he strong arms all the traitor Primarchs when the Horus Heresy happens. Like he's controlled all of them at some point. But yeah, so Fulgrim had to work alongside Horus. But again, this would foster a relationship. But as nice as and as close as Fulgrim and Horus were, they'll never be as close as the Ferrus Manus, Mr. Iron Hands himself, and Fulgrim. Because after Fulgrim became part of the Imperium, he would meet Ferrus Manus, who was busy blacksmithing the forge. Because Ferrus is the blacksmith Primarch, obviously, and so as he's hammering away, Fulgrim shows up, and is just like, "Oh, I need some new weapons, need some new armor. I wanted to come down here and craft it myself." And Ferrus looks at Fulgrim, Mr. Pretty Primarch over there, and is like, "Oh, you're gonna break a nail, whatever. Don't get involved." And this upsets Fulgrim because again, Fulgrim has a strong sense of pride, but that pride comes from his fear of inadequacy. So for his brother, who is like I think Ferrus is like the second strongest Primarch, second or first strongest Primarch in terms of physicality, anyway, not in terms of raw power. And he sees this and he's like, "Oh, is this a fucking challenge?" And this leads to Fulgrim and Ferrus having a blacksmithing contest where they basically try to create the best weapon using the best materials available to them on Holy Terra. Like they're using Terra's forges, so like the most advanced piece of technology available to them, probably like fucking stuff from the Dark Cells even. And the challenge goes on for 3 days. But as this challenge is going on, they're on like silent, like they're both in the same room working on their weapons independently but they're gonna talk to each other, obviously. Like, at first it starts off as like, thinly veiled insults, to direct insults, to arguments, to debates, to conversations. And then as they continue to, trade discussions, they end up inadvertently taking in the comments and opinions of one another to indirectly create the perfect weapon for each other. Because as Ferris is hearing Fulgrim's debates, his arguments, his conversations, he ends up forging a sword for Fulgrim. A sword that is elegant, that's beautiful, that shines brightly, just as bright as Fulgrim tries to shine himself. And this sword is called Fireblade. It's a blade that is said to be just as hot as the moment it left the forge forever. It is a sword that is permanently on fire, and apparently the flames of the sword grow in intensity depending on Ferrus Manus's like desires himself. So if Ferrus Manus is pissed off, this sword is fucking raging, and it's almost meant, and it was meant as like a connection between the brothers. Like, hey, we may be halfway across the galaxy from one another, but as long as this sword is still burning bright, you know that my passion is still there, that I'm still out there in the galaxy. And Fulgrim did the same thing. He took in Ferris's brutal behavior, his sense of strong will, his sense of defiance, his sense of, you know, of his own sense of perfection, of people striving to be better. And just like how a blacksmith needs to craft a hammer, Fulgrim crafted Ferris a hammer. He built him, I believe it's called Forge Breaker, which is a hammer that is said to be so powerful it can break mountains. Now, we've never seen that, but the the idea that there's a hammer that is that powerful, I wouldn't be fucking surprised, honestly. It's fucking like, we put a cyclonic missile in it, so when it hits, it creates an earthquake. That's what I'm thinking is happening. But yeah, and they trade weapons, and they both agree that they both made the best weapon ever. And so, any chance that these guys had to work together during the Great Crusade, they took it. Like the moment Horus let Fulgrim off the leash. There's two jokes there. So if you can figure those out, let me know in the comments below. But the moment Fulgrim was let off his leash by Horus, he immediately went to go like hang out with Ferrus Manus. Like not immediately, but it's like, hey, let me grab my psyker. Hey, Ferris, where are you? Oh, you're fighting a human Xenos Empire. I'm gonna join. Hangs up. Everyone head that. We're gonna go meet up with my bro. Like that's what they were doing. If they could work together, they were working together. They were fucking people up, and it was awesome, right? It was great for them. But as all things go, things got to turn to shit because this is Warhammer 40K. And oh, I almost forgot. And I need to specify this because no one talks about this. Conrad Kurz hung out with Fulgrim. Like Fulgrim was one of Conrad Kurz's biggest inspirations, which is really funny because you would think that Conrad Kurz would have turned out better. But besides the point, they hung out and they were actually good friends as well. Like Fulgrim's best friends were Ferrus Manus, obviously, who was probably no homo, but definitely homo. And then you had Horus, who was his inspiration, his big brother. And then you had Conrad Kurz, which is really weird to consider that. Like when Conrad Kurz went like batshit insane and almost killed Rogel Dorn, Fulgrim was one who was like, "Bro, calm down. Like I'm right here. What's going on?" And then Conrad Kurz is like, he's frothing at the mouth, meaning like, "Oh my God, we're all gonna die. I'm gonna get my head chopped off by a crazy female naked lady." It's fucking Conrad Kurz just having one of his regular Tuesday moments. Fucking take your meds, bro. Besides the point, I'm just ranting at this point. So, because of this, as Fulgrim would, work on his own independent campaigns, he would actually come to this beautiful planet. Like it's an ocean world, and it was like 90% ocean. Any landmass on the planet were these coral cities, like literal like cities made out of beautiful coral, like sprouting out of the ocean. And Fulgrim obviously was like, you know what? I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna take it over. Why not? Like this is part of the we gotta take this world as part of the Imperium. And this is where they took the Coral City because this planet was home to Xenos that were probably not actually Xenos. Well, they were Xenos, but they were corrupted by Chaos. So, fun fact: Chaos is a thing. They're demons, and this planet was ruled by the demon Slannesh. Well, I guess it's Chaos God now, Chaos God Emperor, Slannesh. And so when Fulgrim arrived on this planet, he would fight basically like Slannesh corrupted Xenos. But as they would, fight their way through the temple cities, basically of these Xenos. Fulgrim started to realize that the deeper they got, there's a joke there. There's even more jokes in this Slanesh themed episode about Fulgrim. The deeper that they went into the temple, the more they found that the more of these Xenos stopped fighting back. They became so focused on their own ecstasy and their own like joys and pleasures that they stopped even like fighting the war. And when Fulgrim enters the center of the temple city after basically like walking through and killing all of them, he finds a massive, can I even say the word on YouTube? Like it was a massive debaucherous scene where it wasn't just like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but there was murder involved in this fucking thing. It was ridiculous. And Fulgrim realizing this was like, hey, you know what? Everything in here is dying. I'm killing all of it. Everything is dying. And he did. Obviously, him and his legion killed everything. But at the center of this temple was this beautiful sword. This sword that was even more beautiful than the coral cities themselves. And as Fulgrim examined it, he couldn't help but like be drawn to it. And this is where something interesting about the legion comes into play. Because the Emperor's children had it can be a bad habit. They were a little bit of kleptomaniacs. They're not kleptomaniacs, kind of kleptomaniacs. They're not the blood ravens, okay? But they're a little bit. What they would do is that when they would conquer a planet, particularly a civilized planet, is they would take trophies from that planet. But these trophies were often like cultural pieces. They basically British Empire that they would come to a planet and they're like, "Oh, this is a beautiful statue that we didn't destroy. What is it? Oh, it's one of your gods, huh?" So we're gonna take this. Thanks. Beautiful. Thank you for the donation. My dad says thank you. We're taking this. It wasn't always, like statues. They didn't like immediately British Empire it because they would sometimes take people. If they found someone, if they fought someone, or if they fought a human faction that had a talent or a skill or even like a method of war that they had not encountered before, they would often take this specialist, this like general leader, and have them distill their information to the Legion to teach this to the Legion so they could incorporate these tactics they'd never experienced before, they never encountered before. And then they would often like give these people positions of privilege throughout the Imperium. Like, hey, you know how to fight asymmetrical guerrilla warfare, right? Okay. Uh train my guys for about 6 years. Next planet we stop by, we'll drop you off, we'll make you a lord. Deal? Like that's what it was. That's effectively what it was. And the crazy shit is that it wasn't just people or artifacts. They would capture Xenos. In the Horus Rising book, the Emperor's children straight up admit that they want to take this like basically Tyranid bioform. It's not a Tyranid bioform, but I'm pretty sure it's implied to be Tyranids. They want to take these like arachnids, these murder spiders, and bring them into their capital ship in the gladiator pits and fight them to train. They want to do what the custodians do. They want to capture Xenos that they've never fought before and then fight them in gladiator pits. Like that's what the custodians do. That's what the custodians do to traitors. Like this is ridiculous. So they would do that, and I think that's like ridiculous and hilarious. And that was particularly because of their propensity to want to excel. Like, hey, we've never fought these guys before. These guys killed us a bunch of times before. Let's capture them and fight against them constantly in the arena. That's the best way we can train. And so, because of this propensity to do that, Fulgrim took the sword. He was like, you know what? We take trophies. I'm going to take that sword. That's a beautiful piece of artwork. It's a cultural thing. I'll take it. But as Fulgrim examined the sword and as he held it in his hand, he looked at it and he's like, this sword is really nice. But this little like purple diamond thing, I'm not the biggest fan. It kind of throws off its feng shui. It doesn't look right. It's just a little too much. And then Fulgrim's like, no, no, it's not too much. No, in fact, this isn't it. No, never mind, my mistake. This purple diamond brings it all together. It's not too much. That's because Fulgrim's change of mind comes from the fact that that sword that he finds, the Lair Blade, is actually a demon sword. Inside it is a Keeper of Secrets, one of Slanesh's most powerful demons and her emissary. And what this thing does is while Fulgrim is holding the sword, it messes with his mind. The moment Fulgrim has that sword, his thoughts are warped. And yes, he does commit he has a lot of faults. He makes a lot of mistakes about the Horus Heresy. But when you consider the fact that the beginning of like in I think it's 60 years. In the 60 years from like getting the sword to the Horus Heresy, because there's a lot of time that passes, Fulgrim is being manipulated, right? Like we can all acknowledge that like if I look at something and I'm like, I don't like this, and then like 2 seconds later I'm like, no, I really like this. Like that's a demon gaslighting me. Like I think we can forgive Fulgrim a little bit for that. And eventually, like Fulgrim does keep it in a stasis chamber. Like, I don't need this sword. Like it's nice, I might use it, but I'm gonna put this in like our reliquary for now up until he doesn't, because the sword still calls to him. It still draws him, and he ends up using it. But he uses it in tandem with the Fireblade, so he's dual wielding swords, right? Like Fulgrim is he's just Kirito from Sao, and he's fighting with these two swords. But as he uses the Lair Blade more and more, his attachment to the Fireblade diminishes, and eventually he stops using the Fireblade. Eventually, like at first, when like before he gets the Layer Blade, the Fireblade was his main weapon. He was predominantly a melee build fighter. But once he gets the Layer Blade, he dual wields for a little bit, and then he gets rid of it and goes back to just using one sword. But it's just the Layer Blade, and that sucks because it's like this weapon that Ferris made for him. Fulgrim is disregarding it because the demon is gaslighting him into thinking that it's more pretty, and this leads to Fulgrim's descent, because as these things go on, his legion is slowly becoming twisted by the influence of Slannesh and Fabius Bile, who I'll do Fabius Bile. I'll do a video on him eventually. But Fabius Bile, he's because of his willingness to, push the boundaries of what is capable, mostly because he's a little bit insane, wants to include Xenos biology into the Astartes. Because in his mind, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, the Astartes they can see in the dark, they can spit acid, they can gain memories from eating brains, they have unbreakable bones. What are we missing? Like, do we need anything else? Like, it's one of those where it's like, how far can we take the Astartes? Can we get camouflage? Oh, Conrad Kurz and Corvus Corex could do that, huh? That's warp based, damn it. So we can't have camouflage skin. Can we shoot lasers out of eyes? No. Okay. How about Sonic Scream, Banshee style? Great, perfect. Let's take out the vocal cords and get started on that. That's basically what it was. It was like, okay, well, the Xenos that they were finding, like the lair, the Slanneshy Xenos demon things, they had the ability to release a sonic scream that could kill Astartes. Fabius Bow's like, hey, that's powerful. If we ever need to fight Astartes, this is a setup for later. This would be fantastic for us to have. Let's implement that into our Astartes. And he would begin grafting the Xenos vocal cords to Astartes. I think Eidolon was the first. Was it Eidolon? I think it was Eidolon. But he was the first person to get it. And yeah, it was a sonic scream. They could basically adjust their vocal cords to such an intensity that it would kill people. It would cause their brains to explode. And because Fabius Bile wanted to push the boundaries, he would bring this to Fulgrim because he did seek permission, obviously. And initially, Fulgrim was like, no, don't tamper with the genetic code because that's going to fuck us up in the long run. Because, implementing if you put Xenos biology inside of a human to make them a hybrid, that's going to corrupt the human DNA that the Astartes gene seed uses. That's just going to cause issues in the long run. Like, that's Fulgrim's logic. Like, hey, listen, let's not do that. Like, my gene seed that I produce is very pure. If we do that, that could cause some major issues in terms of mutations in the long run. Fast Battle's like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I won't do that. No, wink, wink, right? And Fulgrim's like, no, no, wink. Don't do it. Don't. It's like, yes, I won't do it. And eventually Fulgrim just fucking was like, you know what? Do it. Yeah, you know what? Do it. Sorb was kind of telling him to, but, whatever. And Fulgrim ends up allowing his Astartes to be modified. Like, he knows. And this is where the warrior lodges for the Legion come in, is that basically the warrior lodges are secret societies within the legions that are spread across all the legions, but they're all unified by this idea of we're all part of the lodges, these people aren't. And so what happens is that these shared secrets and these almost like cult like practices start to form within these warrior lodges. And so this actually causes the Primarchs to not like those secret societies, but Fulgrim allowed them to happen because his legion benefited from it. And when the Horus Heresy happened, it was really shitty for Fulgrim because he found out by a Xenos because like Fulgrim has been killing Xenos the entire Crusade, right? But the Xenos that encounters him is Eldrad Uthwe. He is a very powerful Eldar Psyker. And he has seen the strands of fate. He has seen Horus turning traitor. He has seen Horus kill the Emperor. And so Eldrad he basically uses his future sight to see all the Primarchs. And he looks for the one Primarch who is the most radiant, the one who has the best potential. And that's why he goes to Fulgrim. Because Fulgrim his nickname is the Phoenix because just like how he brought Chemos back, like he revived it like a phoenix does. So he is known as one of the most luminous, one of the brightest, one of the best Primarchs. And so that's why Eldred seeks him out. Like, hey, if there's anyone I can reason with, if there's anyone I can reach out to, if there's anyone who might have the slightest chance of helping me and doing what's right, it's going to be this guy. It's going to be Fulgrim. Fulgrim, however, did not agree when he heard that. He immediately felt like this was Zeno's treachery and that Horus would not turn traitor. And this led to a conflict between Fulgrim and Eldrad. And this conflict almost led to Eldrad dying, and instead ended up seeing a Avatar of Cain 1v1ing Fulgrim, and Fulgrim literally choking it out, which makes no sense because the Avatar of Cain is like a construct, like it's a machine, right? It's a war machine. How does it need breath? Like, okay, complete honesty, Fulgrim doesn't get off unscathed. Like, it isn't just like, oh, I'm fucking choking it out and it's dead. No, Fulgrim does like burn half his body. Like, it literally like melts half his face off. But he still chokes out a machine. So, like, what are you gonna do? But this ends up actually causing Fulgrim to go to Horus to like, okay, why is why is the Eldar trying to form diplomatic peace treaties? Like they always raid our planets. They don't know the difference between Drukhari and Eldar, obviously. But he's like, I'm gonna talk to Horus. And as he's approaching Horus's vessel, there's a slight almost like a switch clicks in his head. Because he sees Horus's fleet. But their fleet isn't responding to Fulgrim's, or I should say that Fulgrim's fleet is still hidden to Horus's fleet. And Fulgrim sees Horus's fleet, and there's a moment of him that wants to say, "Fire everything." Like he considers the possibilities of like, "Hey, what if Eldrad is right? What if the Xenos is right? What if Horus will turn traitor?" And he's almost going to give the order to shoot to destroy Horus's ship. Like, you know what? What if? Worst case scenario, he is. Like, worst case scenario, he isn't a traitor, and I just killed my brother. That's awful, but he's the War Master now. And he's starting to do things that I might consider a little bad. Because he did just like kill a bunch of people and give Angron a bunch of like just cause to murder everyone. So like maybe he's going a little too far. Maybe I should just, fire just in case. And then he hears something. Father, you have forgotten your sword. Because the dumbass little bitch that is Eidolon found the lair blade and brought it to Fulgrim. Because it's like, oh, you forgot your sword. Here you go. And the moment Fulgrim touches the sword, or even I think he just sees the sword. I haven't read Fulgrim in a while, but the moment he sees the sword, all of his thoughts about wiping out Horus are gone. Every single one erased. He's like, why am I here again? Oh yeah, I'm going to see Horus. Right. Let's go see him. And Horus convinces Fulgrim to become a traitor. But Horus is the man for Fulgrim is that he kills Ferrus Manus. Because Ferrus Manus is one of the probably the best warriors, best commanders, one of the most powerful Primarchs, and probably like a close rival to Horus. Like I think out of all the Primarchs, you would have Horus, you'd have Guilliman, the Lion, and Ferrus. I think those four guys, I think like those four Primarchs, they're probably like the four pillars of what makes the Imperial armies, not Imperial army, but the Imperial Legion so strong. Like I'm sure Rogel Dorn could be thrown in there, but I really think just Horus, Guilliman, the Lion, and Ferrus, those four are like some of the best all around commanders and Legion builders. So like it's like if you destroy him, like kill Ferrus, he's one of our biggest one of our biggest issues. Gilliman's gonna get ambushed at Calf, and I sent Lion just somewhere. I send Lion somewhere. Stop Ferrus, kill him. Fulgrim, however, because he still loves his brother, like he genuinely, like again, his connection to Horus is great, but his connection to Ferrus is beyond that. And so when he's given the chance to kill Ferrus because he visits Ferrus, he doesn't. He gives Ferrus the chance to join. Like, hey, brother, guess what? Horus has decided that he's going to turn traitor, usurp the emperor, and then he's going to take over everything. Isn't that great? And Ferris's natural response is obviously just like, I'm sorry, did you just fucking say what? And this obviously results in the brothers fighting. And this is what I kind of don't like. Because, like, Ferris is obviously stronger. He's obviously a stronger commander. But I honestly do think Fulgrim is a better duelist. And so the following duel results in Ferris actually getting knocked unconscious. Like he gets defeated by Fulgrim because it's a surprise attack. He's a better duelist and they're in close quarters. I do think Ferris should have did a bit more damage though personally because I think it just makes him look weak even though he isn't. But that's a rant for another day regardless. And this results in Fulgrim having the chance to kill Ferris. Like Fulgrim can kill his brother right then and there. He's unconscious, but he chooses not to. Like, hey, you know what? Blast the engines, leave the ship adrift, kill his honor guard. We'll leave him in space, right? If we leave him here, he's gonna be left adrift. His legion might not even find him, and that'll give us time to launch the attack and destroy the loyalists, take over the Imperium. All done. And then once it's done, we come back to Ferris. He has no choice but to submit. Perfect, right? That's obviously makes the most sense. That's obviously what's gonna happen. It's not what happens, obviously, because Ferris is almost immediately found by the loyalists. He tells them what happens, and he becomes the vanguard commander when it comes to leading the assault on, I believe it's Isfahan 5. Isfahan 3 was Isfahan 5. And Fulgrim is chewed out by Horus like it's no tomorrow, and he is expected to lead the attack against Ferris's countercharge. And this is where the drop site massacre happens, which is where Fulgrim and Ferris do battle, and the traitors slash loyalists arrive. I'm not going to cover them though, but basically Ferris is fighting Fulgrim, and Fulgrim for a moment doesn't want to fight him. He's like, you know what? I'm just fighting you because Horus is telling me to, and it sucks, but you guys are going to get defeated. Like the Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, and Night Lords just showed up in your back line, and you think every single one of those guys is a loyalist. Ferris, just surrender. Just surrender, and maybe Horus might go easy on you. Ferris does not surrender because he is honestly a pretty cool badass Primarch, and he tries to 1v1 Fulcrum even though they are being attacked in the rear. He charges Fulgrim because there's no in his mind it's like, hey, you know what? This is the last straw for Ferris anyway. And he rushes Fulgrim, who's just like, you had your chance to leave. Like you could have left. Like Corvus is trying to escape. He's fighting Lorgar for some reason though. And we just nuked Vulcan. Like if you want to get out of here, now's your chance, buddy. But no, they fight. And Fulgrim doesn't want to kill him. Like he still loves him. But the sword does. And with a very quick, a very clever parry, he disarms Ferris and cuts off his head. He kills him. And in his grief, in his sorrow, Fulgrim is so defeated that when a voice speaks to him, when what he believes to be his conscience, his sense of guilt, begins speaking to him and begins telling him to just let go, he does. Yeah, Ferris died, but so did Fulgrim. Fulgrim died that day, and the demon took him over up until he gets tortured and then given his body back. But that's where Fulgrim dies for a point. He becomes just a puppet for the demon until he ends up getting set free. And then this ends up leading to Fulgrim basically fucking up all of the Primarchs when it comes to I guess the traitor Primarchs anyway, because he ends up, I think he pisses off everybody. Like he pisses off Horus with his attitude. I think he ends up pissing off Lorgar, but he ends up having some big, well, no, Lorgar has issues with him because Lorgar doesn't like the idea that Fulgrim is possessed by a demon, because in his mind, Lorgar thinks that the demons and Primarch should fuse together, not one to plant the other. So that's where his issues are. But he really does fuck up Perturabo, because in Perturabo's case, Perturabo has always admired Fulgrim. Even one of the few people at Fulgrim and Perturabo and Fulgrim, they shouldn't get along. They are polar opposites, but they do. They do get along because they both have that sense of perfectionism and want to achieve greatness. In Perturabo's case, it involves sending wave after wave after wave of his own men at the enemy, but you still get the points. And so Perturabo actually admired Fulgrim up until he's seen the Legion starting to degrade mentally and become basically the worst kind of rock stars. And this only got worse when Fulgrim betrayed Perturabo, stealing his soul and becoming the purple snaky snake that he becomes with 4 arms and each one with a poison sword on it for some reason. I don't know. Fulgrim's weird. And then he ends up like basically leaving for a little bit until he gets like dragged back. I think he gets convinced to join by Lorgar though. I don't fully remember that part because that was those were some of the books in the horror series that I skipped over because that's like book 46. I'm not fucking doing that. I'm not doing that. There's a level of patience I have and that's not there. But he does end up arriving in the Solar War and the Siege of Terra where he fights Sigismund for like 2 seconds until Sigismund realizes, oh, I can't fight a demon Primarch. I can probably kick Abaddon's ass, but I can't fight Primarchs. I can't fight a snake Primarch. Luckily, though, Rogel Dorn does because he's just there with his fucking conveyor belt chainsaw sword. And I personally don't know why Fulgrim beat like how Fulgrim beat Rogel Dorn, but I mean like okay, whatever. And Fulgrim gets banished from the Siege of Terra basically for the rest of the Horus Heresy. He does come back though and like slits Gilliman's throat, but like that's Gilliman's fault. Okay, like I don't understand why Gilliman was like, okay, let's make chapters. I'm gonna have 1,000 guys. I'm gonna go attack Fulgrim, who has like I think he had 11. I think he had like 110,000. So it's just like yeah, one Primarch, 10,000 Space Marines. Gonna go fight a Legion of Space Marines and a Demon Primarch with 4 arms. Wish me luck. And why he lost, I'm sure he's still wondering himself, obviously. But up until that, that's kind of where we leave Fulgrim off for a good portion of it, up until he returns in, I think it's the most recent book called Fulgrim. I think it's called Fulgrim Perfect Sun. I haven't read it. I've heard mixed reviews on it, and I've seen people saying that it mentions Rogel Dorn coming back. Like, yeah, of course Rogel Dorn's coming back. I honestly hope he's next because I really don't want Lehman Russ to come back. I'd rather have Corvus or Rogel Dorn back, honestly. Or you know what? No, give me Omegon. Give me Omegon. Have Omegon come back as a loyalist. That'd be amazing. Make Omegon come back as a loyalist. Make Lehman Russ become a traitor, and then have yes, give me that. Give me a reason to kill Lehman Russ. That'd be great. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys want to, feel free to like and comment below. Make sure to subscribe though, because I really want to get these subscriber numbers up. And support my Patreon if you can. For $3 a month, you can help me uh, basically make more videos because I can commit more time and effort to making these videos as awesome as possible. I did actually upload a PDF for basically a fan-made Warhammer detachment for Space Marines, themed around the Spartan 2s from Halo. So if you guys are familiar with my Homebrew Heresy series, I actually made a detachment, like 10th edition rules, for basically Spartan 2s. It has, attachment ability, it has some relics slash enhancements, it has a single stratagem. I might add more to it, but if I do, it'd probably be like something for free. But yeah, so feel free to support that. Feel free to give those a look, and of course, I have my homebrew chapter generator for Space Marines as well up there as well. I am planning on making expansions for it as well. I have a Sisters of Battle one written up and a Imperial Knights one I'm working on. I do want to clarify though that when I say expansions, I don't mean like, oh, this is a Sisters of Battle version of the chapter generator because people are asking for a Chaos version. I'll get to that sometime, not soon though. But the expansions are basically almost like DLCs. Like, hey, did you like fighting with the Sisters of Battle? Okay, well here's an expansion where you can fight with just the Sisters of Battle against another enemy force and develop a character relationship through there. So yeah, if you guys enjoy that, feel free to head over to my Patreon. The link will always be in the description below. But with all that out of the way, I have nothing else to say, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Bye.